Apoptosis and necrosis. Apoptosis is the programmed cell death, while the necrosis is the irreversible cell injury that may be caused by the trauma, by the hypoxia and the exposure to the toxins. It is not the programmed cell death. Apoptosis. In this video, I will tell you about the physiological, morphological and the biochemical changes that occur in the apoptosis and the necrosis. First, physiological changes. Physiological changes about the apoptosis is that physiologically apoptosis affect the individual cell or the clusters of the cells, while the necrosis often affect the contagious cells. Second point about the apoptosis is that physiologically apoptosis evoked by the physiological as well as the pathological stimuli, but necrosis is induced by the non-physiological disturbances, that is pathological, that may be the hypoxia or the toxins exposure to the cell. Number third, physiologically apoptosis is phagocytosed by the macrophages and the other cells. Other cells may include parenchymal cells or the neoplastic cells, but necrosis is physiologically phagocytosed by the only macrophages. Number 4. Physiologically apoptosis have not been associated with the inflammation, while in necrosis it is associated with the significant inflammatory response. These are the physiological changes. Morphological changes that occur in the apoptosis and the necrosis. Morphologically, in apoptosis, the integrity of the cell membrane is preserved. The integrity preserved with the blebbing of intact plasma membrane. But in case of necrosis, the integrity of the cell membrane is lost. Second, morphologically, in apoptosis, the cell shrink and the convolutions with the intact organelles. But in necrosis, the cell, instead of shrink, in necrosis it swells up with the disruption of the organelles. Number 3 is morphologically in apoptosis there is pycnosis and the karyohexis. In necrosis there is karyolysis, pycnosis and the karyohexis. Morphologically in apoptosis there is formation of membrane bound vesicles that are called apoptotic bodies. In necrosis there is complete lysis of the cell, so no vesicle is formed. In apoptosis, cytoplasm with the organelles retained in the apoptotic bodies. In necrosis, the cytoplasm is released out. Next to the biochemical changes. Biochemical changes. Apoptosis is the energy dependent process, that is, there is ATP needed, ATP required. In necrosis, it is energy independent process, so no ATP is required. In apoptosis, there is transient loss of mitochondrial membrane potential, but in necrosis, there is permanent loss of membrane mitochondrial potential. Apoptosis is the cascade dependent process. There is no link of cascade pathway in the necrosis, so it is not dependent on the cascade pathway. In apoptosis, the pH of cell is acidic, but pH of cell is unchanged in necrosis. In apoptosis, non-random mono and oligonucleosomal length of the fragment of the DNA occur, but in necrosis there is random digestion of the DNA occurs. Apoptosis is the pre-lytic DNA fragmentation process biochemically, but necrosis is the post-lytic DNA fragmentation process. So this is about the physiological, biochemical, morphological changes in the apoptosis and the necrosis.